Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut, really, to getting a handle on complex global issues. We spent some time sifting through, a pretty big stack of sources today. Yeah, covering politics, justice, cultural heritage fights, and this ongoing battle over truth itself. Our mission, as always, is to pull out the absolute key insights for you, give you what you need, without drowning you in information. And today, there's a really strong theme emerging. It's all about accountability, or maybe the lack of it. We're seeing powerful people, institutions either facing the music or actively trying to dodge it.
That's exactly right. Accountability, or maybe defiance against it, it really connects everything we looked at. And these aren't trivial matters. We're talking high stakes. We'll kick off with a pretty groundbreaking trial in South Africa. First time social media posts are being used as, well, the main evidence for terrorism charges. Then we'll jump to the U.S., where accountability seems to be getting sidestepped through presidential power. Very different dynamic. From there, we broaden out, look at contested history, diplomatic spats heating up in Asia, and finally, what it takes to figure out what's real in a world increasingly filled with, well, AI fakes.
Okay, let's dig into that first section, though. Political fallout, legal accountability, South Africa. We're focusing on the trial of Duduzile Zuma Sambudla. She's the daughter of the former president, Jacob Zuma, and she's just pleaded not guilty. The charges are serious: incitement to commit terrorism and public violence. This is all tied to those devastating riots back in 2021.
Devastating is the word. Over 350 people died. The economy took a massive hit. It was the worst domestic unrest the country had seen since apartheid ended. Really shook the nation.
And the trigger, just to remind everyone, was her father, Jacob Zuma, handing himself in for contempt of court. He'd refused to show up at that big corruption inquiry looking into state capture.
Right, he ended up serving about 2 months of a 15-month sentence. But the riots exploded right after he went in.
So what makes this trial legally groundbreaking, you said?
Well, it's the basis for the charges. Our sources are clear. This is the first time in South Africa that terrorism-related charges hinge almost entirely on someone's social media activity, specifically posts made during that period.
Wow. So what are the prosecutors actually claiming she did online?
They're arguing she deliberately used social media to incite violence, to encourage people to commit public violence, effectively using the guise of, protesting her father's imprisonment.
And they have evidence beyond just a few tweets.
Oh, yes. Sounds quite detailed. They're citing 164 WhatsApp chat groups.
164.
That's the number mentioned. They claim these groups were specifically created to coordinate the riots. That suggests a level of planning, not just spontaneous anger.
That number really points towards organization, doesn't it? So what's the defense saying?
Well, they're pushing back hard. A representative called it a targeted prosecution. Their argument is that her posts weren't incitement at all. They were just reactive commentaries.
Reactive commentaries.
To what they frame as the unlawful imprisonment of a liberation hero. They're leaning heavily on the political angle, painting her father as a victim and her as just commenting on it.
That's a tough sell against 164 coordination groups, maybe, especially given her political ties.
Exactly. She's aligned with her father's new party, MK, which, broke away from the ANC. So there's a clear political dimension here. The court's job is to decide, was it just commentary or was it actively fanning the flames? Operational incitement. Big question.
It really is, and that struggle over accountability, particularly using digital evidence, leads us almost directly to a completely opposite situation in the U.S., where accountability seems to be getting actively deflected through executive power. We're talking about the recent pardons issued by former President Donald Trump.
Yes, a really striking use of the pardon power. He pardoned several key allies, people deeply involved in the efforts to overturn the 2020 election results.
Who specifically was on that list?
It's quite a roster. Rudy Giuliani, obviously, who was very public with the fraud claims. Mark Meadows, his former chief of staff. Sidney Powell, the lawyer, pushing conspiracy theories. John Eastman, the architect of that legal plan to keep Trump in power.
And even others?
Yeah, even some individuals who acted as so-called fake electors in 2020. It was a pretty broad sweep.
Okay, but let's be clear. These pardons only cover federal crimes, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these folks are facing state charges, too.
That's absolutely correct. Federal crimes only. But the significance here isn't just the immediate legal relief for these individuals. It's the message. The proclamation itself framed the prosecutions of these allies as, and this is a quote, a grave national injustice perpetrated on the American people.
A grave national injustice. Wow.
Yes. And it positioned the pardons as necessary for national reconciliation. So, It's using that executive power not just to forgive potential federal crimes, but really to try and delegitimize the entire legal process against his political supporters.
It's quite a statement. And the timing, especially with Giuliani, I mean, he just lost that massive defamation case, didn't he?
He did. That $148 million judgment for the two Georgia election workers he defamed. The federal pardon doesn't touch that civil liability.
So he gets federal protection, but still faces huge financial consequences at the state level from that civil suit.
Precisely. It shows that even with a federal shield, the actions related to challenging the election have very real, very significant legal and financial repercussions for some. A sort of split accountability, you could say.
Okay, so from political accountability, let's pivot slightly. Let's talk about accountability for, well, for historical wrongs and how that plays out today. We're shifting to Nigeria now. There were protests reported at the new Museum of West African Art, MOA, in Benin City. What was that about?
This is fascinating because it ties historic looting directly to modern political friction. The core issue is the Benin bronzes. These incredible artifacts were looted by British soldiers way back in 1897. Now, there's been some progress on restitution. Over 150 original bronzes have actually been returned to Nigeria over the last 5 years, which is a big deal.
That sounds like good news, a success for restitution efforts.
It should be. But the problem is these returned bronzes aren't actually on public display, and that's where the protests come in.
Why aren't they being displayed?
Politics. Local politics, specifically. There's apparently a pretty intense rivalry between the former state governor and the current one in Edo State. They're from different political parties. And the current administration is allied with the Oba, King Yuar II, who's the traditional and spiritual leader there.
Okay, and the Oba has a specific view on this.
He does. He strongly maintains that the bronzes belong in the Benin Palace, which is, where they were looted from in the first place. Not necessarily in this new museum, Momoa.
Ah, so it's a dispute over where these returned treasures should be housed, and that's causing paralysis.
Exactly. An internal disagreement is stopping the public from seeing their returned heritage. The protesters at Moa were clearly siding with the Obaing. They were chanting, "Long live the king," in the Bini language.
So a failure to agree internally on how to handle the fruits of restitution has created a whole new conflict. Wow.
It really highlights how complex dealing with historical legacies can be, even after the objects are returned.
Speaking of conflict and flashpoints, let's jump to Asia. High-stakes geopolitics between Japan and China. This seems to have flared up recently.
It really did, triggered by comments from a very senior Japanese official, PM Takaichi, who holds a key security post.
What did she say that caused such a reaction?
She was talking about a hypothetical Chinese attack on Taiwan, and she stated that such an attack could constitute what Japan officially calls a survival-threatening situation.
That sounds like specific legal or strategic terminology for Japan.
It is. It's language linked to Japan's conditions for potentially using collective self-defense. She went further, suggesting scenarios like a Chinese naval blockade of Taiwan or military action that stops U.S. forces from intervening these could trigger Japan needing to use force itself.
So she was essentially outlining potential red lines for Japanese military involvement.
That's how it was widely interpreted.
Yeah.
And Beijing's reaction was, let's say, not subtle. It was furious.
How did they react?
The Chinese consul general in Osaka, Xu Jian, posted something quite shocking on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter.
What did it say?
The post, which was later deleted, read, "We have no choice but cut off that dirty neck that has been lunged at us without hesitation."
Cut off that dirty neck from an official diplomat. That's extraordinary language.
It is extremely aggressive, especially for diplomatic channels.
Yeah.
Japan, understandably, reacted very strongly.
I should think so. What did they do?
They lodged a strong protest directly with Beijing. They demanded the post be deleted immediately, which it was, and they asked for a full explanation.
And what was China's explanation?
Damage control, basically. The foreign ministry spokesperson in Beijing, Lin Jian, tried to downplay it. He claimed the post was just Xu Jian's personal opinion.
A personal opinion from a consul general threatening violence?
That was the claim. He said it was directed at remarks advocating military intervention, not at Japan itself, and then sort of blamed Japanese politicians for hyping the issue.
Whether it was personal or not, it shows how incredibly tense things are and how quickly words, even on social media, can escalate things. Which brings us neatly to information integrity.
Absolutely. When diplomatic language gets that raw, trusting information sources becomes even more critical.
Right. So let's turn to that now. Information integrity. Starting with, well, an institution usually seen as a standard bearer, the BBC. Their chair, Samir Shah, recently admitted the BBC should have acted earlier regarding concerns over how a documentary was edited.
Yes, this was about a panorama documentary that featured Donald Trump, a serious issue for the BBC's credibility. The core accusation was that the editing was misleading. It apparently spliced together bits of a Trump speech from January 6, 2021.
Spliced it how?
Yeah.
To what effect?
To make it seem like he was explicitly telling people right then and there in that speech excerpt to attack the U.S. Capitol. The BBC later acknowledged this editing gave a misleading impression.
That's a major editorial failing. Has there been fallout from this?
Significant fallout. It followed the resignations of two very senior figures, the Director General, Tim Davie, and the CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turnus.
Wow. So real consequences. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? Even major news organizations can stumble under pressure when reporting on intensely politicized events.
It really is. And if established institutions face these challenges, imagine the problem when deliberate misinformation is created using sophisticated tech like AI.
Yeah, that's the scary part. Our sources highlighted a really disturbing example linked to the war in Ukraine.
Extremely disturbing. We're seeing these fake videos circulating online. They show supposedly Ukrainian soldiers crying, very emotional.
What's the narrative they're pushing?
The claim is that these are young men, some supposedly as young as 23, being forced into conscription against their will. But this is demonstrably false. The minimum conscription age in Ukraine is 25, not 23. But the fakery goes deeper.
So?
Well, there are visual clues, like soldiers wearing ill-fitting helmets, things that look slightly off. But the real tell came from facial recognition. One of the faces used in these viral crying clips. It belongs to a known Russian streamer, Vladimir Yurievich Ivanov, who goes by Kusia88 online.
Kusia88. And 88, that number has specific connotations, doesn't it?
It does. 88 is widely recognized as a neo-Nazi code for Hail Hitler. So the face used in this fake Ukrainian soldier video belongs to a Russian streamer associated with neo-Nazi symbolism.
So it's not just fake, it's potentially coded propaganda aimed at a specific audience. That's incredibly sinister.
It points towards a very deliberate, multi-layered propaganda effort. It plays right into Russian narratives, trying to paint Ukraine as desperate, collapsing, forcing unwilling kids to fight.
And this wasn't a one-off instance.
No. Another face, identified in similar fake videos, belonged to a Russian man named Alexei Gubanov. He's actually a known critic of Vladimir Putin. He confirmed his image was used entirely without his consent, generated by AI.
Unbelievable. Using the face of a Putin critic for pro-Russian propaganda, the level of manipulation is just staggering. It makes you question everything you see online.
It absolutely does. The challenge of verifying information is immense and growing.
Okay, that is pretty heavy stuff. Let's consciously shift gears for a moment. We need a bit of a palate cleanser, I think. Let's end with a story not about digital manipulation, but about real-world resilience. From nature, actually. We're heading to Greece, to the northern Pindos National Park. There's a conservation biologist there, Haratakis Papaionou, who's been tracking something quite positive.
Yes, this is a genuinely hopeful story about the Balkan chamois. It's a type of mountain goat antelope. Their populations in this park had been struggling, but over the last 25 years or so, they've seen a really drastic recovery. They estimate there are about 1,000 chamois in the region now.
That's fantastic news. What caused this turnaround? Was it a big conservation project, new laws?
Well, partly conservation efforts, but the main factor Papioni points to is actually quite unexpected. He calls it a human shield effect.
A human shield? What does that mean?
It means the number of hikers and mountaineers visiting the park, especially the higher mountain areas where the chamois live, has increased significantly. And all these extra people simply being there, enjoying the landscape, has made it much harder for poachers to operate unseen.
So more people enjoying nature inadvertently protected the animals from illegal hunting.
That seems to be the primary driver of the recovery. Human presence, which we often think of as disruptive to wildlife, has in this case acted as a deterrent to poaching. It's a neat example of unintended positive consequences.
That's a really great story. Resilience in the face of threats, driven by something unexpected. It connects back, in a way, to the resilience we all need to navigate the information landscape we were just talking about.
It does. And if we just quickly look back at everything we've touched on today, it's quite a range, isn't it? From political leaders in South Africa facing incitement charges based on WhatsApp messages, to U.S. presidents using pardons to shield allies, to historical artifacts like the Benin bronzes sparking modern political fights in Nigeria, and this constant struggle for truth, whether it's challenging edits at the BBC or debunking AI fakes from conflict zones.
Absolutely. The common thread, as you said at the start, is this constant battle over accountability, narrative, and control. And the big takeaway for you listening has to be the critical importance of knowledge, of being informed, especially when powerful forces are actively trying to bend the narrative. We've seen truth challenged in courts, in diplomacy, in museums, in the media. It's under pressure everywhere.
And the sources we discussed, the court documents, the pardon texts, the social media posts, the diplomatic messages, these are the raw materials that will eventually become history.
Exactly. So that brings us to our final thought for you to take away and consider. If leaders and diplomats are getting into these dangerous wars of words like we saw between Japan and China, based on maybe future threats, and cultural institutions are stuck, paralyzed by arguments over the past, like with the Benin Bonzes, then think about this. From all the specific documents and records we mentioned today, the WhatsApp logs in South Africa, the U.S. pardon text, that deleted threatening tweet, the museum dispute records, which single piece of information, which specific document or record do you think needs the most urgent, careful, impartial protection right now so that future generations can understand what really happened? What needs saving for tomorrow's citizens? Something to think about. That's all we have time for on this deep dive.